March 24th, 1945. 25,000 feet above Berlin. Oberleutnant Hans Muller of Jagdgeschwader 7 watched the incoming bomber stream through his cockpit canopy and smiled. 400 B-17s stretched across the horizon, fat, slow American targets. And escorting them, he'd been told, were the Schwarz-Vogelmännchen, the Blackbirdmen. Muller had heard the rumors. American pilots, Negroes, flying P-51 Mustangs with red tails. His squadron commander had briefed him last week with barely concealed amusement. "The Americans are so desperate," the commander had said. "They're sending their inferiors to fight us. Show them what real pilots can do." Muller's squadron flew Messerschmitt Me-262 jets, the fastest, most advanced fighters in the world, 540 miles per hour, 100 miles per hour faster than any American propeller plane. They were untouchable. Or so he thought. What Muller didn't know was that the men flying those red-tailed Mustangs had spent the last 4 years proving every assumption about them wrong. They had been called an experiment, a test to see if black Americans could fly combat aircraft. The expectation wasn't just that they would fail. It was that their failure would justify keeping them out of the military forever. But on this cold March morning over Berlin, Hans Muller and his jet-flying squadron were about to learn what happened when you built your tactics on lies, when you underestimated men who had spent their entire lives being told they couldn't. This is the story of how the most mocked, most doubted fighter squadron in American history became the most requested bomber escorts in the entire war. How they fought 2 battles simultaneously, one against the Luftwaffe in the sky, and one against racism in their own military. And how on that March day in 1945, they did something no other American unit had done. They shot down Hitler's jet fighters and changed the course of American history. In 1925, the United States Army War College published a document that would poison American military policy for 2 decades. It wasn't a battlefield report. It was pseudoscience dressed as strategy. The Negro, the report stated with cold academic certainty, is of inferior mentality. He possesses weak character and is fundamentally subservient. Black men lacked the intelligence for technical jobs, the courage for combat, and the leadership for command. This wasn't just one racist officer's opinion. This was official doctrine. This document became the justification for a completely segregated military. Black Americans could serve, but only in menial roles. Cooks, stevedores, manual laborers, never pilots, never officers, never warriors. By 1940, with war consuming Europe, the hypocrisy was becoming impossible to ignore. Civil rights leaders hammered the Roosevelt administration with a simple question: how could America fight for democracy abroad while denying it to 13 million of its own citizens at home? The pressure worked. Barely. In 1941, the War Department announced the formation of the 99th Pursuit Squadron, an all-black flying unit. But they didn't call it Progress. They called it the Tuskegee Experiment. That word, experiment, is crucial. It was a test, one that many in power expected to fail. Hope would fail. They sent the cadets to a segregated, hastily built airfield in Tuskegee, Alabama. The base commander was Colonel Noel Parrish, a white officer who, unlike most of his peers, actually believed the experiment could succeed. But he knew the deck was stacked. These men will be judged on a standard no white pilot ever faces, Parrish told his instructors. A single failure will be used to condemn their entire race. So we cannot accept anything less than perfection. The training at Tuskegee was brutal, a crucible designed to create unbreakable pilots. While white cadets in other programs flew 200 hours to earn their wings, Tuskegee cadets flew 300. The washout rate, the percentage who failed, was 60%. Far higher than the 40% at white training bases. The cadets understood what was at stake. They weren't just flying for themselves. They were flying for every black American who would come after them. Second Lieutenant Charles Hall, one of the first graduates, would later recall, "We knew that if we failed, they'd shut the whole thing down. They'd point to us and say, 'See, we told you they couldn't do it.' So we couldn't fail. We refused to fail." By April 1943, the first class of Tuskegee pilots shipped out to North Africa. led by Captain Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. They arrived ready to prove themselves. Davis himself was a living symbol of their struggle. The son of America's first black general, he had endured 4 years of the silent treatment at West Point, where no white cadet would speak to him outside of official duties. He had graduated anyway, unbroken, and now he was leading men who carried the weight of history on their shoulders. Their arrival in Tunisia was a cold shock. They were assigned to the 33rd Fighter Group, commanded by Colonel William Momeyer. Momeyer made no secret of his contempt. He gave them worn-out P-50 Warhawk fighters, obsolete planes already outclassed by German Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs. Then he assigned them to coastal patrol, milk runs, routine sweeps far from real combat. It was deliberate. Sideline them, ensure they never had a chance to prove themselves. Then write in the reports that the experiment had failed. For weeks, the 99th flew frustrating, pointless missions. But then on July 2nd, 1943, everything changed. The mission was supposed to be routine. Escort B, 25 bombers on a raid against a German airfield in Sicily. Standard procedure. But as the formation approached the target, First Lieutenant Charles Hall saw 2 Focke-Wulf 190s diving toward the bombers. This was it, the moment they'd all been waiting for. Hall broke formation and threw his P-40 into a hard turn, cutting inside the German fighter's flight path. His thumb found the trigger. "I fired a long burst," Hall reported later, his voice steady but his hands still shaking. "I saw my tracers penetrate the second aircraft." He was turning, but suddenly fell off and headed straight into the ground. Hall had done it. A black American pilot, flying an inferior aircraft, had just shot down one of the Luftwaffe's fighters. When Hall landed, the ground crews erupted. They lifted him onto their shoulders, parading him around the airfield. Mechanics who had endured the same daily insults as the pilots now had proof, undeniable proof. That afternoon, a single swastika was painted on Hall's Warhawk, the first of 112 aerial victories the Tuskegee Airmen would claim. But one kill wasn't enough to silence the doubters. Colonel Momeyer continued filing negative reports. In September 1943, he submitted a devastating assessment to headquarters. The 99th Fighter Squadron lacks aggressiveness. They are timid in combat. I recommend they be removed from frontline duty permanently. The report landed on the desk of General Henry Hap Arnold, commander of the entire Army Air Forces. The Tuskegee program was on the verge of being shut down. Everything they'd worked for, all the training, all the sacrifice, Charles Hall's victory, was about to be erased by one prejudiced commander's lies. Then fate intervened. January 1944. The beach at Anzio, Italy, was a killing ground. Allied forces clung to a narrow beachhead, and the Luftwaffe was throwing everything at them. Waves of German bombers and fighters attacked relentlessly. On January 27th, the call went out for every available fighter. The 99th scrambled. 15 Tuskegee pilots in obsolete P-40s flew into a sky swarming with superior Focke-Wulf 190s. They were outnumbered, outgunned. According to Momeyer's report, they should have broken and run. They didn't. They tore into the German formations with ferocity that stunned everyone watching from the ground. Over 2 days of savage fighting, the men Momeyer had called timid shot down 12 German fighters. Lieutenant Charles Hall got 2 more. Captain Lemuel Custis shot down another. Pilot after pilot registered kills. In 48 hours, they destroyed more enemy aircraft than in their entire previous 7 months combined. The performance was so spectacular, so completely at odds with Momeyer's report, that the War Department was forced to investigate. They launched a statistical study comparing the 99TH's record with other P-40 squadrons. The conclusion was undeniable. When you factor in their equipment and mission assignments, the 99th was performing as well, if not better, than white squadrons. The experiment was over. Anzio had saved them. Now they were about to get the chance to prove something even more important than killing the enemy. They were about to prove they could protect. May 1944. The 99th was combined with 3 other Tuskegee trained squadrons, the 100th, 301st, and 302nd to form the 332nd Fighter Group. Their new mission, long-range bomber escort deep into Nazi Germany. Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, now commanding the group, gathered his pilots at Ramitelli Airfield in Italy. He knew this was their ultimate test. "Our job is not to be aces," Davis told them. "Forget personal glory. Forget chasing kills. Our job is to bring those bombers home. We stick with the bombers, no matter what." This was radical. Most American fighter groups encouraged pilots to break off and hunt enemy fighters. Davis demanded discipline over glory. He knew their success wouldn't be measured in swastikas painted on fuselages. It would be measured in bomber crews who made it home alive. Around this time, the 15th Air Force ordered all fighter groups to paint distinctive markings on their aircraft for identification. The 332nd was assigned red. They didn't paint a small stripe. They went all in. The entire tail section of their brand new P-51 Mustangs was painted brilliant crimson. Red tails, red nose bands, red propeller spinners. The legend was born. At first, the white bomber crews didn't know who these new escorts were. They didn't know they were black. All they knew was something was different. These red-tailed fighters didn't dart off chasing German planes. They stayed close, weaving a protective shield around the vulnerable bombers. If a bomber was damaged and fell out of formation, becoming a sitting duck, a pair of red tails would peel off and stick with it, fighting off attackers all the way home. Word spread like gospel through the bomber bases. Crews started calling them the Red Tail Angels. Briefing rooms would buzz with question, "Who's our escort today?" If the answer was the 332nd, relief would wash over the room. Bomber groups began specifically requesting the Red Tails for the toughest missions. The men deemed unfit for combat were now the most sought-after protectors in the sky. Their discipline, born from brutal training at Tuskegee and forged by Davis's unwavering command, was saving American lives. The numbers proved it. On average, other P-51 groups lost 46 bombers under their protection. The Red Tails lost only 27. But their greatest test was yet to come. By March 1945, Germany was desperate, but they had one last terrifying weapon, the Messerschmitt Me 262 jet fighter. It was a technological nightmare. Top speed, 540 miles per hour, 100 miles per hour faster than the P-51 Mustang. It could appear, strike, and vanish before propeller pilots even knew what hit them. Fighting it seemed impossible. March 24, 1945, the 332nd received their most challenging mission. Escort B-17s on a 1,600-mile round trip to Berlin to bomb the Daimler-Benz tank factory. Intelligence warned them. The target was defended by Jagdgeschwader 7, an elite unit flying Me-262 jets. Colonel Davis led the mission himself. 43 red-tailed Mustangs climbed toward Berlin. As they approached the target, the jets appeared, the largest formation of German jets ever assembled for a single battle. They sliced through the sky, turbines screaming. Hans Muller, the Oberleutnant we met at the beginning, was among them. He'd heard the briefings. American Negro pilots. Inferior, easy targets. He lined up his first attack run, targeting a straggling B-17. But as he closed in, something unexpected happened. A red-tailed Mustang didn't chase him head-on. It turned away. Muller followed, confident in his speed advantage. Then, as he blasted past at 540 miles per hour, the Mustang whipped around and got on his tail. Lieutenant Roscoe Brown was flying that Mustang. "We knew the jets were faster," Brown would recall years later. "But they couldn't turn like us. So we didn't chase them. We made them chase us. Then we turned into their blind spots." Brown squeezed the trigger. 3 long bursts. The Me-262 shuddered. Smoke poured from its engines. The German pilot ejected. 1 jet down. That same day, Lieutenant Earl Lane hit a Me-262 from over half a mile away with a deflection shot that shouldn't have been possible. Lieutenant Charles Brantley got a third. In a single afternoon, the Red Tails shot down 3 of Hitler's superweapons. More jets than most American fighter groups would destroy in the entire war. Hans Muller survived. His parachute brought him down in the ruins of Berlin. As he watched the red-tailed Mustangs continue their escort, shepherding the bombers through the flak and smoke, he understood something his commanders had refused to see. These pilots weren't inferior. They were among the best in the sky. 32 Tuskegee Airmen were shot down and became prisoners of war. Lieutenant Alexander Jefferson's P-51 was hit by flak over France in August 1944. When he was captured, the German interrogator knew everything about him. His parents' names, his father's job, details about Ramitelli Airfield. Their intelligence was frighteningly thorough, Jefferson recalled. He was sent to Stalag Luft III, the camp featured in The Great Escape, and there Jefferson experienced something surreal. Inside a Nazi POW camp, he found integration he'd never known in America. White American bomber crewmen, men whose lives had been saved by red-tailed escorts, treated him as an equal. They shook his hand, thanked him. Here I was, Jefferson said, in a Nazi prison camp, being treated more equally by white Americans than I would be back home. When the war ended and Jefferson was liberated, the first thing that happened when he stepped back onto American soil was segregation. Separated from white soldiers, sent to the back of the base. He had fought for his country, nearly died for it, been honored as an equal in a German prison, only to return home to the same racism he'd left behind. He had won the war against fascism, but the war against racism was far from over. When the final numbers came in, they were staggering. 15,000 individual sorties, 1,578 combat missions, 112 enemy aircraft destroyed in the air, another 150 destroyed on the ground, 96 distinguished flying crosses awarded, and their bomb protection record, second to none. But their greatest victory wasn't measured in statistics. It was measured in the change they forced on a reluctant nation. Their performance was irrefutable proof that skin color had nothing to do with ability. Civil rights activists used their combat record as a weapon after the war. In 1948, President Harry Truman signed Executive Order 9981, officially desegregating the U.S. Armed Forces. The men who began as an experiment had become architects of a revolution. Recognition came slowly, criminally slow. It wasn't until 2007 that the Tuskegee Airmen received the Congressional Gold Medal, the nation's highest civilian honor. By then, only 300 of the original pilots were still alive, but their legacy was already written in the contrails over Berlin, in the grateful memories of thousands of bomber crews, in the fabric of an American military and society they helped change forever. Roscoe Brown, the man who shot down a jet over Berlin, put it simply, we didn't just fight the Germans. We fought ignorance, prejudice, and hatred, and we won all three battles. They were set up to fail, expected to fail, called inferior, mocked, doubted, and in the end, they did the one thing their doubters never thought possible. They soared. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more untold stories of courage that changed history. Drop a comment. Could you have carried the weight these men carried? Fighting two wars at once? Let us know where you're watching from. The Red Tails prove that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do to your enemy is underestimate the people you've oppressed. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure their story never dies.